So the recording has started. Hello again, everyone. Thanks for joining. So thank you, Lucy and Naseem, for your time as well. Finally, we are here to talk about whether technology can support the D&I agenda in recruitment talent acquisition space. But before we proceed, I would like to remind our audience, let's stay on mute. If you want to ask any questions or if you want to share any comments, you can put them in the chat box, so we can address them afterwards. And also, I want to remind again, we are recording the conversation. I hope that's fine with everybody. Before we start the conversation, I would like to also do a brief introduction about Lucy, Naseem, and myself. So those of you who don't know all of us, you have an idea who the speakers are. So let's start with Lucy. Lucy has a 30-year career across recruitment and executive search. She began her career in a mid-sized business where she was responsible for opening many new markets and launching many new products. During this period, she also helped to establish what became a separate HR consulting division. In this division, Lucy worked with business psychologists to devise and facilitate large client-facing recruitment programs. She also worked at Korn Ferry before setting up her own consultancy in 2002, where she focuses specifically on executive recruitment into procurement. And now, of course, at WireUp, we have the privilege to have her on board as our strategic advisor. A few words about Naseem. Naseem has gone from sourcing goods and services to sourcing human capital. After gaining 15 years experience as a supply chain practitioner, he turned his attention to what he enjoys the most, leveraging his network, connecting the dots, and finding the best talent in the supply chain profession. He founded a supply chain executive search firm in 2012, and he recently launched a new procurement and supply chain online career portal. He's also an active startup advisor and an angel investor in the future of work sector. Apart from that, Naseem is an active member of the Institute for Supply Management and various purchasing councils. He has authored articles for Inside Supply Management Magazine, Procurement Leaders, Procurious, and Spend Matters. And he presented on topics relating to talent challenges in the global marketplace. So we are very grateful for them to be on this call, on this webinar. A few words about me, for those of you who are curious. I started my career in corporate life. I worked at blue chip companies such as Ford Motor Company, KPMG, GlaxoSmithKline. At some point, I did my MBA at Harvard Business School as well. Throughout this period, my favorite projects have always been in designing a new process or finding creative solutions to business problems. It took me 15 years to realize that actually my dream job was being an entrepreneur. So I teamed up my wonderful co-founder, Dr. Arda Çelebi, to create WireUp, where we make job interviews efficient and transparent. But don't worry, today I will not waste your time with a sales pitch, because our objective to discuss whether technology can support the DE&I agenda in recruitment and talent acquisition. So maybe before we start and dive deeper into that, it's helpful to align on our reference points. So maybe we can start with the scope of the D&I agenda. A lot of companies, as you know, focus on gender and race diversity, which are absolutely essential, no question about that. What else should be included in the scope, do you think? And now I will extend the microphone to Lucy and Naseem.
Well, obviously the whole LGBTQ and age, absolutely, and religion. I think we've covered most of them there. Oh, and disability, of course, and neurodiversity, diversity of thought.
Yeah, good point there, Lucy. And I think overall, from a U.S. perspective, we have almost close to a dozen different categories, right? When we talk about the protected class of what you just mentioned, right? You can talk about veteran status comes into that, genders now comes into that. So there's federal, I think there's 9 or 10, and then the states actually have some leeway on their own, and some states have further broadened the area to include more categories for DEI. So.
Absolutely. And don't they in the States do like positive discrimination? Don't companies have to hire a certain number of people from those protected groups, or is it a good to have?
Yeah, no, so a good question. I think a lot of the industries, when you think about dealing with the government, right? So if you're on the contractor side, or if you're defense contractors and manufacturers, some of those sectors absolutely have requirements that, you know, they need to have certain folks across the different protected classes, right? I think even age 40 and above is a protected class as well. So they have, so even that's one of those categories. So they want to make sure that they make it as broad as possible for trying to include, because of the changing demographics, and they know that a lot of their clients and customers and overall people that are being represented are part of it. So they want to make sure that comes into it. And a big part of that, and I think we'll get into this moving on, is even from here, this has actually helped on the supplier diversity side too. So, you know, in the past, it was just the supply chain folks that were leading the effort and not as much buy-in at the C-suite. But even now, that because of the renewed focus on DEI, we've seen that actually help the supplier diversity perspective.
Absolutely. And
do you see any difference in the UK, Lucy, when it comes to the policies, regulations, so against what Naseem told about the US?
So in the UK, we level the playing field. We make everything as unbiased as possible, but when we don't have like positive discrimination. So we can have an aspiration to have 50% boards, female boards, for example, and drive diversity, but we're not allowed to actually take positive action. And in fact, recently, the Royal Air Force got into trouble for positive discrimination against women and people from different ethnic backgrounds. And it resulted in the actual head of recruitment for the Royal Air Force having to resign because they were skewed towards women and Black, Asian, ethnic minority people. So, yeah.
So that's similar?
Painful.
Yeah, that's similar across Europe as well, or is UK different when it comes to positive discrimination?
I think we're still basing ourselves on European principles, but hey, let's not get into Brexit.
Yeah. No, I was asking if other countries in like Germany, France, Spain, if they have different policies compared to what you just described in the UK.
I'm not aware of those.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious. Yeah, who cares about those guys, right?
I care very much. I really do.
I'm kidding.
So in terms of recruitment, moving on to recruitment and about how the technology drives the DE&I agenda, one of the things that I'm very surprised about is that actually, if you see what I was doing back in the early 90s, when we didn't have really any technology, we just had you know, people answering adverts in the Sunday Times or the Telegraph, and we were going through piles and piles of CVs. The same thing is happening now, apart from you have technology helping. So people are sending in their CVs, there are adverts, and then the technology comes in to try and slim down the piles of CVs. Things don't seem to have moved on. We seem to still rely on a CV or an application form as the first part of a recruitment process.
So I think we wanted to talk a little bit about overall HR tech, right, F.A., and then get into on the buy side as well too. So you know, one of the interesting things that we've seen just since the since the pandemic has been the sprout of a lot of different startups supporting HR tech. So we have seen companies come up that, you know, in areas that are completely new. So for example, there's companies now from a tech perspective, right? Startups, you have companies doing mentorship. You have companies now doing performance management. You have coaching and career services. You have employee experience and bonding. You have smart decision making when it comes to groups. And another big category has been like burnout and resilience management, right? All of these things have taken on a heightened importance post-pandemic and into our workplace now. Now, a lot of these companies, like for instance, let's look at mentorship, right? How does that fit in on the DEI? Is that traditionally the mentorship process has been a bit dysfunctional, right? It's been a top-down. They don't last as long. They're not as effective. But now with a lot of these tools that have come out, the administration of it and the way they actually help spread access and help more of the employees gain visibility to more senior level folks within the companies, and having a robust online presence. There's a company called Tribute, I think. They're working on this. There's a few others, but it just shows how the evolution on the tech side is helping broaden access, visibility, transparency of people from all different types of backgrounds, especially now as more and more folks are working remote, right? As the hybrid is now part of the way we work now. Just because you're not in the office, it shouldn't mean that you're going to be left out. So tools like this have come out, but if we look back before 2 years, HR tech has never really been one that's been that attractive. Let's put it that way, right? When companies think about investing in software or SaaS companies, you've got product management, you've got fintech, you've got all these other categories. So HR has been traditionally a little bit more of an afterthought than some of these other functions. And there's a lot of different reasons for that, right? I mean, HR sometimes is viewed as more of a cost center versus strategic. Maybe HR leaders don't understand the technology as well, or they can't get people to use it. So whatever the reasons have been in the past, but it's exciting now to see how there's more and more of these tools coming up. And even now in our world, when we think about recruiting and hiring, just in the past several years, you now have different job boards. You have we've had LinkedIn and Career Monster. We've had Indeed for a long time as well. But now there's even more niche job boards that are very specific to verticals. I'm sure, Lucy, you've had exposure to these as well. And that's now providing access both to candidates and clients to be able to find the right amount of people, and we hope in a non-biased way.
Absolutely. And it's like, so the niche job boards obviously are focusing on different pools of candidates, and what they do, in my opinion, what they sell to the clients is, we've got this targeted pool of candidates that is you can search on, or they can be searched against your job description, but what's the tech behind it? So is it just a database? And then a client goes in and puts in some keywords to choose candidates, or is there something behind that? Now, I think there's still too much reliance on keyword technology in recruitment. So, either CVs are screened for keywords, or clients are searching databases on keywords. Just because you've got a lot of great keywords on your CV might not mean that you're right for the job or you're the perfect candidate. It seems sort of clunky when you think we can put a man on the moon, that so much tech is still relying on keywords. And you could spell, how many times do you see the word manga on LinkedIn? You're not going to pick up any managers. You could be the best manager in the world, but you spelt it wrong, because guess what? You might be dyslexic. So, keyword technology is, I think, recruitment tech 101. And it's too clunky, and I don't think it necessarily drives diversity.
Fantastic observations, Lucy and Naseem. Thank you very much. So I think apart from all these technologies, these new technologies, emerging technologies, there's also the basic tool called CV, which has been around since, I think, the Second World War. Do you think CVs are still relevant? Because lots of people are using it. Do you think they are still relevant, or is it time to drop them or move to something else? So what's your opinion about that?
Well, I mean, there is technology that will remove things like your scrub your name or indicators off your CV that could drive bias, okay, or not help diversity. I've yet to speak to a client that actually uses this technology. And we know that people with foreign sounding names are less likely to get an interview. There's been lots of studies of that. So, I mean, I'm in recruitment. I'm in executive recruitment. I need a CV to see whether someone's worked in a specific company. But if we're thinking about mass recruitment, where you're looking for graduates, or you're looking for apprenticeships or engineers or store managers or security staff or care workers, how relevant is a CV?
Absolutely.
Over to you, Naseem.
Yeah, no, good points there, and I agree. Now there are a lot of sectors where you absolutely need your CV, right? You need a resume. I mean, in our over 10 years of doing this, we've only had maybe 1 or 2 clients that have been. We have one currently that actually doesn't care about a CV. They're like, okay, we can look at a LinkedIn profile, and that's fine as long as there's enough information on there. Some of these are more geared towards tech backgrounds. They're more, they've got much more of a technical skill set and capability, so they're comfortable doing that. But for the most part, I think a lot of companies do want to still see some kind of a CV. But from a candidate perspective, what we always like to tell them is, hey, think about something beyond just a CV, if nothing else, as a way to set yourself apart. And one of the things that we're seeing over the past several years, and one of the things we like to advise them is on have some other body of work that you can also show to supplement your resume, right? So you can have a website, you can get a domain on your name and put some of your accomplishments, or show yourself more of a all-round or holistic person. If you have other interests, put that on there. Or if you have some other interest, if you've got a blog you want to write about, create a blog. Or even something as simple as LinkedIn, right? Start posting there and develop your expertise and showcase that. Because, or some actually will say, yeah, we have a resume, but it's just a digital resume. There's the link and you can see it. So it's just an online resume, that's it. But any one of those things do actually help you, help set yourself apart than just a typical 2, 3, 4 page resume. Now, that being said, resume still is one of your most important document that highlights your background, your track record, your accomplishments. So that cannot be shoddy. It should not have typos on it. It should not be an absurd length of like 4, 5, 6, 7 pages. And it shouldn't, and it should reflect something to the effect of what you've done, regardless if it's online or a paper version. So you need to have something, but now more than ever, there's so many different avenues to show that I think it would be smart to avail some of those.
I'm just thinking that the CV, relying on a CV and relying on all those other things, yeah, that's good for executive level. But if we're thinking about mass recruitment, we're thinking about early careers. Having a great CV, having a blog, having a website, having a body of work, how does that drive diversity? If you want to work in security, or you want to work in store management, okay, who has the time to do all of that? Maybe the people that are from a higher socioeconomic background, maybe the people that have got mentors, etc., who can help them with these ideas. So the people that are more marginalized, the people that are looking after their parents at home, people that are working 3 jobs, might not have the time to do that. So I think the reliance on the CV is quite old-fashioned. And you see that with some of the tech coming through, because they say what we're going to do is we're going to screen application forms with our tech. We're going to look at your job description and screen the candidate, or we're going to do some tests, or we're going to do some video interviews to be able to find candidates that have the capability to do the job, rather than the people that have had the great internships or had the great leg up from their socioeconomic background.
Yeah, no, that's sorry, if I just real quick, you're absolutely right, Lucy. And if you look at the workers, so there's another tech company here in the U.S. There's actually a few of them that are doing this, but they are now looking at, okay, so you've got 3 segments. You've got the professional workers, you've got the skilled, and you've got the unskilled. Now, the skilled and unskilled could be anywhere from, hospitality to delivery, gig workers, to skilled could be manufacturing, welders, forklift drivers. So those types of jobs, especially here in the U.S., we're still over 1 million of those jobs are still vacant. The companies are still struggling. So a lot of this HR tech that is also coming to the forefront is how do you connect with those folks, what you just described, from a different socioeconomic background that don't have some of these things available to them, right, to set themselves apart, but yet still want to work and maybe want to work a little bit more independently. How do we attract them? How do we find them? So there's now technology. So what these companies are trying to do is how do you meet that supply and demand of, we've still got low unemployment here. These companies are still needing a lot of these skilled and unskilled workers. How do you find them? Okay, well, if they all have phones or smartphones, then we come up with an app. We need to find through an app a way to find these people, and then these folks can then pick and choose where they want to work, when they want to work, and then what do? They have a very accelerated hiring process. To your point, right? So they'll say, look, you come on here, we'll do a quick, use your phone, do a video interview. We can even pay you online directly to the app. You come in, you'll get rewards. There's gamification. So there's a lot of different things that they're doing exactly to address how you've got workers in different sectors in different industries that need to be connected to opportunities.
Absolutely. I think there is an element of involving more people, reaching out to more candidates, providing a even playing field to all of them. So clearly, CV has been an old but still an old tool, but still there seems to be some use for it, depending on how you use, in which area you use that, and there's an art and science behind putting the right stuff on it as well. There are also very new tools as well, like games. What do you think of using games in talent acquisition process? Do you think it's helpful? Do you think it's practical? How has been your experience with that so far?
So in terms of the games, I'm assuming that you're talking about these sort of tools to sift down a large applicant pool. So you get the candidates get given a game that feels a bit like a video game that they play, and then once they've played it, apparently the technology in the video game can tell whether they're going to be trustworthy or dependable or hardworking or a team player. So I have issues with these games. First of all, it's like, what's happening with the technology from playing this video game that comes up with answers like you're trustworthy, you're dependable, you're a hard worker? Is it based on psychology, business psychology? So how are they making the leap? But secondly, it's been shown that these sorts of games are biased against neurodiverse candidates. So there was actually a BBC program earlier in the year called Computer Says No, where a candidate who had ADHD was kept applying for jobs and kept being given these games that were supposed to, screen his ability to be able to be right for the job. But these games have flashing lights, they have sounds, they have a countdown timer. It really doesn't work with neurodiversity. So I've got an issue with the actual sort of user interface. And by the way, I think they're gender biased because more males play video games, and there's an age issue. I never got beyond Space Invaders. Try me on one of those Game Boy handsets and I always walk into the wall. So I think they're gender biased, I think they're age biased, and I think they're biased against neurodiversity. But more than that, I can't understand how the game then throws out a set of judgments on things that are super subjective, like trustworthiness and dependability. So clients use them, they think that they're going to be able to appeal to the millennials or the generation, whatever it is, but I'm nervous about their use.
You raised some really valid points about what might go wrong about those, or what they are looking into, the audience, the familiarity of the candidates, so how fair it is for the entire applicant pool. Some of the areas that you mentioned, Lucy, are around identifying people's personality fits, behaviors, that kind of stuff. So how do you think the personality tests, skill tests, those multiple choice assessments, sometimes adaptive, how effective are they, do you think? Is there any place in the recruitment space? Are they used well? Can they be done better? So what do you think?
Well, in terms of personality profiling, like you said earlier, when you introduced me, I set up a business psychology team a while ago, and I've worked a lot with business psychologists. And there are some highly respected personality profiling tools that have been built over years and years based on the 5-factor model of the personality. But the business psychologists all agree that these tools should be used to guide an interview. Because when you take one of these, Myers-Briggs, Hogan, SHL, these types of tests, you get a profile. But the psychologists will say there's no such thing as a good or a bad personality. There's strategic self-awareness. So if the profile says that you're very results-driven and you might trample over people, then you use that in an interview to find out whether this person is aware that they can be a bit like a bull running through a china shop, and they make adjustments so that they don't impact, so they don't make an adverse impact on the people they're working with. If these tests, and I've seen facial recognition AI tools spit out things that look like personality profiles, it's like, I just can't understand how AI can come up with something for personality profiling and no one tests it. Dark algorithms. I know I'm going off piste here, but dark algorithms are really concerning me. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Over to you, Naseem. What do you think?
Yeah, it's the good news is that it's still considered to be much more of a subjective piece of the interviewing process, right? So most of our clients will say, yeah, it's one data point, and I don't think I've ever seen anybody's candidacy get torpedoed completely because of any of these different types of skills or assessments, right? Or if everything else was good and this came out bad, and like, no, this is completely a opposite of what we're looking for. So I think by and large, folks will still trust their own intuition, judgment, chemistry that they've had with the interviewer, but that
could be biased.
Right. So, but the good thing is that so this is right now it isn't becoming mainstream to the point where it's, hey, if you don't, if this didn't say that you fit these boxes, we don't care what anything else or any other thing shows, you're done, right? So that's good. But as more and more of AI does become the norm in how we're evaluating, assessing skills, and we talk about upskilling and reskilling, and there's a lot of HR tech out there now in those areas. So I don't know if this is going to last, right? It may be a time coming where they could say, no, you've got to qualify this, these tests or games or whatever before you make it to the next stage. And yeah, there very well could be a bias, as you talked about, Lucy, on your background and what exposure you had to either technology or games growing up versus somebody that did not have access to that, right? And so I think that's going to be a slippery slope moving forward.
But they do use, I've seen it in graduate recruitment with my own family. People get cut off because they didn't score highly enough in the games. And there was that case a couple of years ago where a cosmetics company used facial recognition AI interviews to decide who to make redundant. It was a big cosmetics company. I'm not going to say who, but they got taken to court because they were found, they had to pay out people who were made redundant because they did facial recognition interviews, powered interviews, and the 20 million data points said that they weren't a high on team player or high on customer service, and they got cut. They got made redundant based on the AI. I mean, literally, then 3 beauty technicians took them to court and won. So companies have had to drop that, drop the use.
But
as far as I'm concerned, you shouldn't have facial recognition AI anywhere near
and the strange thing is that it's continuing to evolve in different areas. So what you just said reminded me is recently there's a couple of other startups that have also run into some challenges. Their whole thing was facial AI to tell their employers certain employees look stressed, they look disengaged, they look like they may be bored, or they may have health problems. So there's actually, I mean, companies can already now monitor looking at, especially during the remote period, right, what you're typing, how long you're online, what websites you visited. So that technology now there's out there providers saying, hey, we can now track from facial perspective if an employee is having some problems, they're stressed, and maybe that's a signal for you to reach out and check in on them. That's great, but how about all the other things that they may or may not be misconstruing about an employee? So yeah, this is going to stay interesting.
Yeah, and facial recognition AI was developed by law enforcement, and it has been shown time again to have issues with black and brown faces. So again, I saw a television program where the presenter tried out the facial recognition AI. He was smiling. He was black, by the way. He was smiling. You could not say anything apart from this guy looks happy. The AI said he looked disgusted. So if companies are using facial, and the article in the Telegraph like a month ago saying why you shouldn't wear glasses to an interview with a robot, because they found that people with books behind them, well done, Naseem, were seen as more likely to achieve, whereas people who had headscarves weren't. It's like spurious claims. And you've got the legislation coming up in the States. The Information Commissioner in the UK is set up a task force to look at screening algorithms that are used in recruitment for bias. And so AI needs to be auditable. It needs to be explainable. And yeah, I need to know why, if I'm going to be using technology and the technology is making a decision on who I should meet for an interview, because at the end of the day, human beings meet, I want to know how that technology did it. Now, I'm not, I'm not a genius, but someone needs to explain to me what these algorithms are doing.
I think that's a very interesting discussion you just moved to, Lucy, because we have been talking about the current landscape, what solutions there are, what sort of problems they might create, what benefits they might bring on the existing technology landscape in the D&I space. But if you would talk a little about what good would look like, so what can technology do, or what should technology do in recruitment space to support the D&I agenda? What would be a few points you would like to share with us? What would good look like here? I think you touched upon the explainability aspect a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
How would that be implemented? How do we see that happening? And what would good explainability look like? And anything else, anything apart from the explainability?
So if I think about all the recruitment technology that I've looked at, the whole goal is to take a large applicant. So first of all, you go out to as many job boards, as many places as possible to get as big an applicant pool as possible. And then your technology has steps where it whittles down. So it might use keyword searches, it might use games, it might use video interviews. And then finally you get to a small group that's supposed to be perfectly targeted towards your role, so that you as the hiring manager doesn't have to spend a lot of time screening CVs or interviewing people who are wrong. So good for me would be something that removes all these steps, because every time you add in a step, you add in a chance for a process to fall over. And also, I don't think it's diverse. I don't think it's driving diversity. Let's come back to, again, the people in different socioeconomic groups that can't invest all this time in different steps because they're working 3 jobs. Okay. So good for me would be a tool that would take the entire candidate population and screen them for the role in some way to then be able to give the hiring manager the shortlist of candidates in one step. And now you're leading me towards talking about VireUp.
Gia, I was going to say, Gia, who does that? I wonder. But no, I think you're right, Lucy. And the bottom line is, how do we make this more of an exclusionary process versus exclusionary? And that's something which we see all the time, whether it's HR, whether it's hiring manager. They're more intent or more focused, it seems, initially on how do you exclude a bunch of people that are not the right fit, but that's done in a subjective way, right? In a non-scientific way. And we're sure there's a lot of people that are potential good fits that are being left out of this. Absolutely. Right? So what you're describing is, so to have a tool like this where, okay, sometimes, it can border on ridiculous, because we all know there's candidates that know they're not qualified, but they'll still apply for a job, which is okay. That's their right to apply. But then how do we make this, how do we expedite the process for the hiring managers in HR to be able to leverage either technology or tools that can help them weed out quickly, these folks are not the right fit, this is who we need, and this is how we're going to come up and filter this down and come up with our short list. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where VireUp tools, what they offer, actually is on that path. So I think Efe is probably the best person to expound on this a little bit more. But
And can I just say one more thing? Because you talked about the shortage of staff at the moment and how there's all these openings in the US, same in the UK. And so the tools need to be able to identify hidden talent, people that wouldn't have made it through their assessment process, through their tests, through their AI screening, their AI facial recognition screening. You need to be able to identify the people who maybe don't have a great CV, who maybe do have experience that's relevant for the role, but they have put it on an application form because there wasn't the right box in the application form to put it in. Yeah. So identifying hidden talent is what good looks like. Yeah. And explainability. It has to be explainable, or it's not going to meet the regulations of the legislation that's coming in.
And that's a common problem across both of our countries, is that across the industry, that technology is moving faster than the law, is moving faster than rules and regulations. And they're having a really hard time keeping up and finding ways to legislate this, to regulate this, or to find ways that they make sure that rights are not affected, but at the same time not hindering what could be beneficial at large. So that's going to stay an issue for a long time.
Absolutely.
I want to be mindful of the time. We are at 5:43 UK time, so we have a couple minutes to wrap up. So I think it's been a great conversation, and there are so many takeaways. But before we wrap up, I would like to just share with you some of the takeaways that I think at the core of this discussion. So it sounds like there are different companies, different countries, and they all address the D&I priorities in different ways. Their constraints and their realities are different. So there's no one size fits all type of solution in the technology landscape to help this agenda. I think that's important to acknowledge. There isn't single like a silver bullet for this. Yeah. On the other hand, there is plenty of technology solutions out there. We talked all about many of them. Still, there are others that we haven't had a chance to touch upon. So many of them bring lots of efficiencies to the recruitment process and they add lots of value. But we encourage, I think, jointly our audience that these technologies do not have the same benefits. They come with pros and cons. It's not just a magical solution to any of your priorities, your problems. You have the economic environment, you have your business priorities, ethical priorities, you have team priorities. So it's a difficult solution. So we encourage, I think we should encourage the audience to do their due diligence about whatever tool they have and try the tools before really launching them at big scale. But I think there is a lot of hope there because technology offers us a lot. It's a matter of identifying the right aspects. And I think towards the end, what we talked about were prioritizing explainability, identifying hidden talent, objectivity. I think some of these priorities will be really important going forward. Not because it's the right thing to do, but also a regulatory environment will push the industry in that direction. I think, and also another angle that I found very interesting was trying to focus on the entire pool rather than trying to narrow that down. So the question should be, how can I get the most out of this applicant pool? How can I reach the best ones rather than narrowing down? I think that's a different philosophy there. So I think these are the main key takeaways that I could capture in the conversation. So I think we have run out of time. So I want to I want to extend my thanks to our audience who took their time to join us and be a part of this conversation. And I'm grateful for their participation to Naseem and Lucy. It was a great conversation. I benefited a lot, and I hope our audience enjoyed it as well. So we recorded this video, as you know, and we will make it available online. So you will have a chance to watch it again or share with your colleagues. So really appreciate that. So any comments or questions, please post us afterwards.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you, Lucy. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.